Hi, everyone. Welcome to the new show. I'd like to welcome Miguel Flores from Mexico City and welcome everyone to Singapore. And this show is being broadcast from Singapore to the rest of the world, particularly on Lifestyle TV, Lifestyle TV USA by Dr. Moby. And it's going to be replayed on podcast, Talk About Life, and also international YouTube channel, Talk About Life, and also on my radio program, News and Views on IOW Network. And myself, Vicky Esther Chang, your host, and my co-host, Miguel Flores, and he's going to introduce himself to you with our new audience on Dr. Moby's Lifestyle TV USA, the #1 professional TV. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. And this is the new series that we have for the new season on World News Weekly Review by Miguel Flores and myself. And here, even though it's about world news, and I know that, ladies and gentlemen, no news is good news, but I really hope that we bring some encouragement, some enlightenment as we review certain news. And of course, certain news may not be that delightful, but we present whatever we can as a family entertainment show for the professionals, for mothers, fathers, youths, and anyone out there. And we've got Miguel Flores and myself, and it is today, the 29th of August, 2021 at 9 p.m. Singapore time. And we are already in almost the third quarter of 2021, and 2020 and 2021 is like just zooped over. Let us take stock of our lives, and then also take stock of the daily happenings around the world. Before I get Miguel Flores as our co-host Flores for the show, just want to welcome everyone to Singapore. Singapore is an island. You take about 1.5 hours to drive from the west to the east. And then north to the south is about just an hour. So in totality, it's about 700 square kilometers, a really small island. So today we've got certain very interesting news for you. Interesting in terms of, yes, they are serious, but if you look at it from your point of view, from your perspective, from your country, hey, this maybe is something interesting and new for you because I'm going to talk about Singapore. I'm going to talk about climate change. I'm going to talk a little bit about the pandemic economy in Singapore, and Miguel Flores is going to share with you the news that he has picked about vaccination and also a humanitarian news coming out from Afghanistan. I think all of us eyes are in it, but us being humanitarians also, we like to bring some hope and some encouragement to the people by focusing on human and lives. And let's talk about them. And welcome to Singapore, Miguel. Once again, thank you for being a wonderful co-host for all my shows, because you will never run away. I always have you, ladies and gentlemen. Just to introduce Miguel Flores from Mexico City, my best and favorite co-host, and an award for him as the best co-host of the year. Let's welcome Miguel Flores and give him a round of applause.
Yes,
Miguel
thank
Flores
you.
from Mexico City. Tell us and introduce yourself to our new audience.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation, Vicky. It's a real pleasure to be here. Miguel Flores coming out straight from Mexico City. Yes, she said it by herself. And I'm just a humble English professor here in one of the biggest cities in the world. One, because one of the coolest cities in the world. Second, because it's technically speaking and geographically speaking, one of the worst cities to live in. But well, we're here.
Nah, just kidding. Introduction.
Just kidding. No, it's a great place to be here, and it's a great place to live. Every place has its own magic. Of course, Mexico City has its own magic, and I'm just happy to share the magic with all of you guys.
Thank you so much, Miguel Flores, and a little bit more about Miguel. A professor of English. He runs a highly successful online English school, and that's important because during 2020, I think Miguel has actually shown that pivoting during the worst time of humanity in 2020, he actually did a very successful job, and it was a case study, and we talked about this in my previous series. And another shout out to my YouTube channel, Talk About Life. If you'd like to find out more about Miguel Flores, you can go to YouTube channel Talk About Life and watch some of my interviews with him. And also his podcast, I think, is one of the top Spanish podcast in Mexico City, the PAM dash podcast in Spanish. So Miguel, would you like to tell us a little bit, a minute or so about your podcast?
Yes, of course. I mean, it's a pleasure that you asked me, actually. First of all, it's a podcast that I started doing with my brother. We call it PAM, el podcast. Of course, it's in Spanish. We started to do it because we wanted just a way to express ourselves and the love we have for something that, okay, is pop culture. Okay, I got it. But it's so important in our personal lives because it has given us a way to, I don't know, to be free, to express, to, I don't know, to think that maybe there's something better out there than just the regular things that we see, for example, on the news, or we see in our everyday lives. It's like going to other worlds that allow us to dream, inside of this world that maybe a little bit strange sometimes,
Yes,
with all the things that are going on.
Tell us also about your online English school. Maybe you make a shout out to your school.
Yes, of course. I mean, it's funny that you asked for it because everybody said, how are you going to start up a business during the pandemic? And for some reason, my brain told me, if I don't do it right now, I'm never going to do it. I have also a couple of business partners, which I big shout out to them, because without them, this job wouldn't even be existing. It wouldn't be here. Yeah, I would like to say I had all the credit, but nah, of course, that would be
and what's
very
the
selfish
name
of my
and where
part.
do they find it, Miguel?
Yes, of course. You can look for it either on Facebook Plus Education Mexico. You have to write it with an X, and in Instagram Plus Education Mexico. You put everything together, no capitals, everything is on lower caps, and that's where you can find us.
Yeah, and because this is a wonderful show, we're using technology. If you miss it, you can always pause and go back and listen to it and then jot it down. And also, I'm just thinking that people should just rattle off. You don't even need to like copy it down because you can rattle it off, spell it verbally, and then people can stop, pause, and then go back.
Yeah.
This is the technology we're talking about. It's always there.
Yeah, if you want, I can do it. I can give the name again. That's not a problem.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, it's Plus Education Mexico, PLUSEducationMexico. All right. You can look for us on Instagram and on Facebook. We're not only English professors, we're also teaching, we're starting to teach a bunch of things. If you also want to learn Spanish, of course, we're the best option that you get out there.
So I see you're one of the cases that actually pivoted very successfully, and I believe that a lot of effort has gone into it. So ladies and gentlemen, that's the background of Miguel Flores. I think it's so important for us to reintroduce ourselves to a new audience online on different platforms that we're in, wherever you find us. On my podcast Talk About Life, I'm in about 30 countries, about over 15 to 20 different podcasts in all the podcast catchers: iHeartRadio, Google, Apple, Amazon, Spotify, and likewise Miguel Flores, his podcast too. So we are existing there. And also a shout out to my magazine that GDM D Metropolis Productions has produced. It's My Life, humanity raising each other up, and where Miguel Flores is being featured. You'd like to find out more about him, you can always go online to Amazon at Kindle, and the print is coming out very soon. Support Miguel Flores by going to Amazon.com and Kindle. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. That's a long introduction, which is so necessary. So Miguel, we've got quite a few news for everyone. I'm just thinking, let's start by the world news by showing some of these articles that we thought,
yes, of course. Let's go for it.
Important for our selection, and then we will also share with everyone. All right. So the first news is Hungarian conductor promotes vaccination while he was performing. And then you've got Afghanistan's top school graduate fears for her future. News coming out yesterday. And also in Singapore, F&B outlets were ordered to shut because of unvaccinated diners. And then we've also got news from Greenland that it rained at the summit of Greenland that has never happened before. And also another news coming out from NASA, they spotted Greenland melting from a plane. And then, of course, something similar, flash floods in Singapore and throughout Singapore. Final bonus news is Kamala Harris, VP of the United States of America, was in Singapore last week. All right, Miguel, so there you have it. Tell us about news you selected.
We have a lot of things to talk about, actually.
Yes.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to give the news of what happened to this guy and the Hungarian conductor.
Yep.
Not only because of the news itself, but because of what it represents, you know.
Yep.
And I guess a couple of news that you also shared represent what's the situation right now in the world, considering that yes, we have been in this pandemic, and yes, I understand that we have talked about it a lot and a lot and a lot, and so there's a moment when you get sick of it. I understand that, but there's a reason why it's still a trend. You know, every time we see something COVID related, we have to pay attention, even though if it's something, I don't know, to keep the spirits up, or maybe something that has to call our attention. You know, in this case, this guy is just giving a message, a very powerful message, saying, I want to continue my life just the same as you are. But dude, we have to understand that times are not like before, you know? Everybody and everything in the world has changed in a way that we never saw it come. We never see it coming, you know? But also, this change was supposed to happen. COVID just made it a lot faster.
Yeah, and I think just to echo what you say, Singapore has hit over 80% vaccination. I think except for the children, and sporadic people here and there have not been vaccinated. I think some people are still waiting for certain brands to come in. And my French friend in France, I asked her, are you vaccinated? She's actually waiting for the end of the year, a French developed vaccine. You know, a lot of vaccination development doesn't start or end at the same time. Sometimes you have to have the trials. Sometimes you have to have the number of people in the trials, and then sometimes you need to get the data. So we are shortening vaccination trials and R&D from 5 years or 8 years to like 1 or 2 years. So she was actually, she told me that she's still waiting for the French vaccine to come, you know, because now we're talking about Pfizer, BioNTech from Germany and America, and also Moderna, and then Johnson & Johnson from America, and also you've got Sputnik from Russia, and also from China you've got Sinovac, and also Sinopharm, and from India you've got CoronaVac, many coming out, and also CoronaVax, COVAX vaccine from India. And also I read that China is now developing 70 different vaccines because they've got a population of 1.5 billion, right?
That's a big population right there.
Huge country.
You have to vaccinate a lot of people out there, so you better hurry up.
So they are developing about 70 they are developing a 70 vaccine. So in Singapore, the two main vaccines that we are actually rolling out is actually Pfizer and Moderna, and also in a very small number, the Sinovac from China, and also probably they are considering importing Sinopharm from China at a later stage, but they are really talking about it in the papers. But because I'm not I'm reading all this from the internet news, not so much from a medical point of view, but of course, as a lay person, we are observing all this situation. And you're right that the pandemic, we get a lot of fatigue out of it because we don't want to hear, we don't want to talk, we don't want to watch the news, we don't want to text our friends, and even within families, we don't talk about it anymore. The numbers are going up in Singapore, but even the ministers don't really care anymore.
No, I mean, it's just that well, I don't know how is it there in Singapore, but here in Mexico, it's something very clear. We have to talk about it because we still live in it. I mean, and something that we learned here in Mexico is this thing is not going to disappear. It's very difficult to make something like a virus just disappear. The vaccines, remember that they are not made to cure the illness. They are there to control it. Because, well, the other day they explained it to me in a way that I was like, oh my God, why nobody said it like this before? They said, it's very simple. Imagine a seatbelt. Imagine a seatbelt, all right? It's not gonna avoid the traffic accident, but at least it's gonna prevent you for a bigger damage. In this case, a bigger damage is, of course, death. All right. And yes, I mean, but that's one of the things I also guess that I wanted to introduce this news. Because yes, it was during an orchestra. People is trying to go back to their lives in the best way possible, understanding that it's never going to be the same. But it doesn't mean that it has to be bad. It's just a very brief moment of things that we have to do. I guess I said it in your radio show the other day. It's more like a race, rather a marathon, rather than a 100-meter dash. It doesn't matter if we make it fast or slow, as long as we do it, and that's why I wanted to bring this one up. Because I also want to tell people, hey, we have to hang in there and that's it.
And I thought that it's quite significant because the Hungarian conductor, and I read the news here, he was actually, and I watched the video, he was actually conducting an orchestra on stage.
Yeah,
exactly. He was conducting
that's the point.
Orchestra on stage, and he received the COVID-19 vaccine booster shot on stage, meaning that he's actually receiving the third booster shot, meaning that he could have got the first shot, second shot, maybe 6 months ago, but he wants to particularly choose this time to be in front of an audience and in front of the orchestra, to show even people who are playing the instruments on stage that he's actually getting the jab while he was doing this.
Yeah.
And I thought that it's quite innovative of him to do that. And he does say that with this campaign, he wants to further raise awareness for the need of vaccination. Vaccination can give us the chance to live and work a normal life again, just as we did before. And this is his third shot of vaccine, and his message is the inoculation campaign in Hungary, that the show must go on. That means life must go on. So you have to better take the vaccine. So that was the message from the Hungarian conductor. Would you like to tell us about the second news?
Yes, of course. It would be a big pleasure. It was something a little bit hard. We actually talked about it before because we said, okay, the situation in Afghanistan is not exactly an easy one. And the reason why I selected this one is because we also have to pay attention to what's going on in other parts of the world. Okay, yes, the vaccination thing and the COVID and blah, 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 everything is out there. I got it. Okay,
because this
I understand that.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's my point. I mean, we cannot just be how can I say this? We cannot ignore that there is something really bad going on back there. And also it's like a way to say, open your eyes, people. All right. This is not the only thing going on in the world. And this one is also serious because we're talking about the lives of a lot of kids. we said Afghanistan top high school graduate fears for her future. Imagine you go to school,
Okay,
you
before you do that, let me recap the headlines
yes, of
for the
course.
news. The headlines for the news is that the Afghanistan top high school graduate fears for her future, and that she's got the highest score in all of Afghanistan in her university entrance exams, but she doesn't know what's going to come for the future for her. So that's a lot of fear in a young woman who's 18 years old. Miguel?
And not only on the women, I mean, also if we check on the news, if we just, I don't know, just see it in a certain perspective, we're gonna see that not only her, I mean, since nobody knows what's gonna happen because of the Taliban taking the power in Kabul, it's like a situation. Okay, if these guys really work hard to find out what to do with their lives, you know. But unfortunately, this situation comes in. It's really unstable, and it's really hard to say what's going to happen. We have to do something about it because they are going to end up being refugees in other places in the world. Imagine that you work yourself too hard to say, okay, if I have a chance, I may get out of here. For a lot of people of Afghanistan, they're going to say, if I have a chance of going to Europe or maybe to the United States as a refugee to study there or to do something, that would be a miracle in their lives. But suddenly this thing happens, and that's one of the things I believe we also have to pay attention to.
Would you like to tell me about, about this particular girl who is 18 years old? What about her situation right now?
Yes, let me tell you what's going on with her. Her name is Salji Baran. Highest score in Afghanistan for the entrance exams of the University of Afghanistan. Okay, I understand that Afghanistan is not exactly known for educational level, but hey, they have a decent level, so it's good, right? But the thing here is that she's not even afraid of what's going to happen tomorrow to her. She's afraid of what's going to happen to her future, because she was working to take down this image of the Taliban women, or Muslim women has to stay at home and they have to work according to the Islamic law. She didn't provide any specific about it, but I guess we can imagine what's going on there. All right.
Yeah.
And imagine getting into the classroom, pointing a gun to your face and say, go back to the home. You're not supposed to be here. Imagine that. She wants to get an education because she believes she can do better in life. And that was the situation. August 31st, which is in a couple of days, is going to be a major date because that's the date the last United States troops are going to withdraw from Afghanistan. Would you imagine the situation that they're going to live in? And I wanted to say this news because if we have the possibility to help these people, because there are going to be a lot of refugees all over the world from Afghanistan running away from the Taliban, we have to do it. All right, we have to do it. It's a moral obligation that we have as humans, as human beings. Here in Mexico, we're willing to receive as many people as we can, understanding that, okay, maybe we are not going to have enough capacity to receive as many as we would like to. But it's something that we need to do. Bringing humanitarian news for me is also say, hey, we have to pay attention to what's going on in other parts of the world because they are also human beings. We cannot just be selfish and ignorant about them. We cannot say, hey, things in my country suck. Well, guess what? It's not the only one in the world that sucks.
Ladies and gentlemen, this show is about the world news, and some of these news will come to your country. Besides this, of course, a lot of things happening in Singapore, but definitely a lot of things happening in other parts of the world. Therefore, we are bringing the news from the world in a weekly review for you. And that was Afghanistan, a student, 18 years old. And it is also said that this girl, she does not want to leave Afghanistan. Being a student who's 18 years old, have been, imagine you're a student, 18 years old. You've been there for the whole life. And now there is a lot of upheaval. And for the last 20 years, you have been in this so-called war-torn zone, but probably not in her area. But she does have an education, and she has got the best grades. And she was being asked if she would like to leave the country, but she said that, no, I'm not anxious about leaving the country. She does say that I'm worried about the future, meaning that she's not worried about now, about the drum squatting, possibly bombing down on her, or any possibility that's going to happen now, but her eyes is on the future, and she does not know if her future is going to be any better. She does not know if she will be given a chance to go to school or to go to the university being a girl, because that's a huge issue in Afghanistan. We're talking about women and women and girls are not given any position in a society like that, which we do not want to dive in because it's a complex issue. I don't want to say that I'm an expert, or neither Miguel Flores and myself an expert, but I'm just saying that from a humanitarian point of view, a student who's a young lady, 18 years old, a lot of aspirations, and top of the whole cohort, not only in a university, but in all the university. And she's worried about her future, whether her education will continue, and she wants to aspire to be a doctor. So we're talking about the future, ladies and gentlemen here. Miguel?
Also part of it. I mean, one of the points I would like to highlight here is that she's 18. So basically, she has never seen the country of Afghanistan without the presence of United States or NATO troops. So this is going to be also something new. The people from Western society gave the people of Afghanistan a sense of, okay, maybe things are going to change. It doesn't mean that we have to stop being the way we are, but the changes are happening. Of course, you never understand why a country like this would bother in invading a country like Afghanistan, because, well, it's Afghanistan. It's not something big, but it happened. Of course, I don't mean to disrespect any person that provided his or her service to the military service in expeditions of Afghanistan. But if you look at it overall, I honestly don't see the point of invading a country like this.
Miguel, Singapore is actually sending, I should say, sending support and help in a real physical way to evacuate personnel and also people. And it has already sent 70 military personnel with the planes, the jets and all. And we were talking about physical help for the people there. So I think that is something that we should look forward to in support in many ways. And Singapore does its part because even though Singapore is the smallest country in the world, besides the Vatican City, Vatican City is said to be the smallest city in the world, but Singapore is really the smallest country in the world. We have actually sent 70 troops there, the top troops there to help in evacuation. And likewise, the British have done that. And today, Emmanuel Macron is there to negotiate with the Taliban to talk about humanitarian aid, etc. So we are really talking about humanitarian issues. How do we help the people over there? Even though we do not know the complex issues, we do not know the history, and neither are we saying that we know anything. But I think as a human spirit, we are all commanded to, feel
just to do something about it, right?
For the people.
Like we feel like we have the moral obligation of doing it.
I've got another news about it rained at the summit of Greenland, and we're talking about the North Pole, right? It rained the summit of Greenland that's never happened before. And the report came out yesterday, the 28th of August, in the Singapore papers today news. And it is said that it is something extraordinary that happened on the 14th of August at the high frigid point of Greenland, an ice sheet of 2 miles, about 500 miles above the Arctic Ocean. It rained for the first time since the 1980s, when they started having measurements there. They've never had, of course, before that, maybe there wasn't technology, but they started measurement in the 1980s, but they found that there wasn't any rain in Greenland. Of course, there's just snow. So this is the first time unprecedented that they actually recorded rain, because it says that the National Science Foundation, there was no record of rain since observations began in the 1980s, and computer simulations show no evidence, even going back before, that there was evidence of any rain at the Greenland, said the climate scientist, Mr. Thomas Moot at the University of Georgia. And they did say also, this is something that it is described as the rain was worrisome, because it shows that even a little warming, I'm talking about global warming, can have an effect on the region. And even half a degree of warming can really change the state of the Arctic, which is the North Pole, because you can go from frozen ice to liquid. And this is exactly what we're seeing, and this is exactly what the climate scientists have been trying to predict for the last 20 years. I thought this is, I selected this news, and also selected the other news about NASA scientists spotting the melting of a huge area in Greenland that has become like a huge reservoir of water instead of ice. And I think that's significant. Because, you know, climate change is a huge issue. A lot of countries, I should say, a lot of people, is still a very controversial issue, because in America, there are climate deniers and there are people who are climate propagators. But myself being involved in climate change NGO in Singapore for the last, upteen years, I think this is especially significant, because the scientists have actually, ladies and gentlemen, the scientists have actually presented all these news out there. And in 2004, when Al Gore first came up with his book, The Inconvenient Truth, by the Vice President of the United States, Mr. Al Gore, he talked about in his book the real truth about the world that inconveniences us, because we're talking about reliance of fossil fuels, and also that we can't live without energy. And energy we're using historically till now, mankind has started, it's just burning of wood, burning of fuel, burning of fossils. And we're talking about even cars that is burning, and we are using all this in our gas stove. And all this adds to climate change. And during then, Miguel is also to share with you about 2005, when I was involved in climate change in Singapore and around the region, when I was doing a project for United Nations. This was a new thing in Asia, because in Asia, there's emerging economy. People do not talk about environment. Neither do they talk about climate change, because there's very little education then. And at that time, there is still a lot of misconception about climate change, global warming. Is it ozone layer depletion? What is it? People never talked about it, because we're talking about people who are struggling putting food on the table, getting their jobs, getting economies up, buying a car, getting their careers up. So environment is really at the back end of every country, every government.
Yeah.
So even then, when I was trying to champion the cause of climate change, it was difficult to penetrate through to the consumers. We're talking about consumers in large. But not only that, we're talking about governments who do not care about environmental issues. And environmental issues we're talking about not only climate change, we're talking about recycling, we're talking about rubbish, we're talking about, just keeping the streets clean in Asia. So governments are not taking this seriously. Certain pockets of scientists in Europe was championing about climate change, and they were already predicting that climate change is going to happen, and that coastal cities and lowland areas are going to be flooded. So that dives into my next article about Singapore, that Singapore is actually flooded, in the last 5 years. When it rains, it floods, and it floods in every pocket of Singapore. And Singapore is investing about $100 billion in climate mitigation measures, building of dikes around the island in the ocean, so that we have to stop climate change effect of rising sea level. So it brings me back to this topic to you, Miguel, and also our audience. Think about it. In Greenland,
Yeah.
it's melting from solid, right? And we have studied in our class, if you put a glass of ice, and when the ice melts, what happens? The water level rises.
The water level goes up. Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's no brainer to think about that. So whatever happens in the North Pole and the South Pole in Antarctica, if it melts, and it has already shown that in Antarctica, just 2 months ago, a big plate that is the size of Michigan was broken away and was drifting out and melting. Can you imagine the amount of water that is going to rise in the oceans? And therefore, countries like us, we are the ones suffering because we are a small island in the ocean. We've got no place to run. The rising sea level is real, and if anything, any of the scientists is predicting 20 years ago about rising sea levels, they are already seeing, and our coastal areas are actually being eroded and broken off already in the coastal areas, and the government is actually trying to build stones, right, cement around the coastal areas because the sand is being eroded away. So that's a very serious issue, Miguel, ladies and gentlemen. If there is anyone who's a climate denier, I would say they come to Singapore, and we are putting in so much money in the university about studying the coastline erosion in Singapore, because there's no way to run. We can't move to Mexico City. So this is as impactful, as important news that I choose to share with Miguel and the audience about climate change. Whatever happens in the North Pole and in the South Pole happens everywhere. You may not feel it because people are living in highland, they will not feel it. But when highland in Switzerland, they have recorded last year the first flood because the ice was melting, right? Some of the towns
I remember that one.
Flooded in Switzerland. So that's my news for you, Miguel.
That's a big one. I mean, it's part of I guess part of what we said previously, right? But part of what the things that we need to show to the world as something humanitarian is things that makes us have to open our eyes. We understand completely that there's something going on, but you said it yourself. Are we actually doing enough? Prevent it is not an option anymore, as far as I have understand it from people that has also studied this topic here in Mexico. There's a lot of things going on there. Here in Mexico, we have this big, massive area. It's not like the Amazons, but we have also our jungle in the Chiapas area that because of the economic growth that a lot of politicians claim that we need in this country, well, to produce energy, they almost finished what was left of the forest. I mean, and it was just beautiful place in the southern part of Mexico that had to be protected, even with violence by people living there because they said, dude, you're destroying our homes. Forget about your economical development. You're destroying
Yeah,
our
there's
houses.
always a
What is the
struggle
point of it?
between, right, human needs now and human needs in the future. I mean, we were talking about someone like Greta from Sweden, right? She kind of
Yeah.
championed, the climate change. She's 15 years old. She has, sometimes you've got someone who rises up and there's a start. But when these people go away, the issue kind of like goes out of that headlines. The news it doesn't cover. But you're right. I mean, there are a lot of, like what I say, a lot of countries are struggling. You talked about Africa, right? What do you talk about Africa?
Well, actually, I didn't say anything about
Development
Africa. I did.
versus environmental conservation.
Well, not about Africa. I was talking about what happened here in
Yes,
Mexico.
exactly. I'm just saying that, yeah,
Yes, you're
particularly
right.
a country who is trying to like balance between economic growth versus environmental protection. I mean, it's always like this a win-lose situation that we're in.
I guess it's more like any other negotiation. Sometimes we're gonna win something, but you also have to give something back. Okay. We also understand that you cannot stop just like that economical growth in the countries because people need to eat, even though we may think whatever we think about the governments in the world, and we question ourselves if they are really working for the welfare of the people. uh, we still cannot deny that sometimes job is way bigger than what they expected, and there's a lot of people that still expects government to fix the issue for them, you know depending on what they can get. And that's something that is also part of the problem. It's not really the global warming itself. It's the education that people has and the understanding of the topic that people must get in order to understand that this is a real serious thing. I mean, there's people in the United States denying the sole existence of climate change, saying, "Nah, this is just a thing that Republicans say." Are you freaking serious, dude? Just look what is happening in Louisiana right now.
Yeah,
I mean, how many
yeah,
people is going to lose their houses? And hurricanes like that were not common in the 19th century. Now you see hurricanes devastating an area are like, oh, this is the one of this year, for example. You have to understand there's something bigger going on. Yes, we have to think about how to provide to our families, how to put food on the table, but there's always the way of doing things. At least
yeah.
that's my point of view.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
always
and
a way to do things.
there is a fund, the climate fund, to help countries that are actually affected. We're talking about a couple of things. We're talking about countries that have, we're talking about new kind of threats to people. They are called the climate migrants, because when there's climate change, coastal areas which are flooded, yeah, you're right to say that the food on the table, and these are issues that are very complex for politics to be put in place, for policies to be put in place. A lot of money goes into protecting the people's lives, because when it floods, if you look at the picture,
Yeah, of course.
the ambulance came, the police came to save the people from the streets which are flooded, and you've got old people trapped in cars and buses, people who are directly suffering from that. So we're talking about, yes, I think there are two things we're talking about here: environmental threats that do not come to you yet, right? And we're talking about environmental threats also including the California fires, etc. Environmental threats that are not within your radar, but environmental threats that are already in your face. How do we take care of these people? They're the climate migrants. Are we going to take the millions and the people from coastal areas to the highland and move there? And that happens in Nepal already, because the Himalayan mountains are already melting. So it floods to the lowland, and we've got huge people who are already on a poverty line. They've got no place to run. I mean, they are not talking about food on the table, no jobs already, and now they are being flooded. So there's a fund under United Nations, the UNFCCC, that actually helps climate migrants. But you know, countries like us in Singapore, I mean, blessed that we've got funds to dig into to help people, and also Dykes 100 billion for the next. But you think about it, taxpayer money that can go into education, that go into economy, can go into healthcare, is going into building walls around Singapore. So there is a lot of big, huge macro policies here, because as a taxpayer, you're paying like 100 billion. 100 billion or more, and it's not going to go into the schools, but that you're taking that away from going into the education of the kids and economy again, and putting food on the table and creating jobs and factories, and then putting up on dikes. So, you know, it's always this policy struggle. And I don't think it is easy, and we can actually conclude here in our conversation, because this is about highlighting the news. So that's my news selection for you, ladies and gentlemen, about climate change that happens, something that happens in Greenland, and also the flood that happens in Singapore last week. Unprecedented, because every time it floods, it gets worse. And I think it has a huge impact on insurance, on people's pockets, because you're talking about buying insurance for flooding, buying insurance that is being, that when you are affected about climate. So there are lots of policy on that macro level. Anything you'd like to add, Miguel? Any bonus news from Mexico City?
Well,
I mean, it sounds like it's a bit like the doomsday, right? But that's the news.
That's what I was going to say. It feels like we're going straight to Armageddon or something like that, but that's not the case. Just the thing that from Mexico City, we definitely understand that there's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of issues going on. It doesn't mean that we have to give up. Yes, probably the things that we are showing today are not exactly the happiest ones. I understand that. Believe me that I do. All right. But we promise that we're going to bring something that is going to make you look happier, or make you feel like, okay, maybe things can get better.
Yeah. World News Review to you. Definitely a few selection from us. Miguel Flores talked about the Hungarian conductor who actually had his jet when he was conducting an orchestra, and also Afghan student, young lady of 18 years old. She is now worried about the future. She's not worried about now. She's not thinking about leaving the country. She just wants to know what happens next for her and her education. And myself, a news from Greenland, that is rain that is unprecedented, never been measured before, when the climate measurement instruments was installed in the 1980s. And before that, even in this computer simulation, it doesn't show that it's ever rained in Greenland, because it was too cold, right? It's just logic, right? Whatever comes down is just ice. And also the flooding in Singapore last week, that it just become worse. And people had to be ferried, and you got old people who were on the stretchers. The police came because there was just flood, and people were taken aback. How could there be flood in Singapore? But flood happens anywhere. It just happens in the rural areas. It happens in a huge city too. And also a last bonus news, last week, Kamala Harris, the VP of America, was in Singapore, not to talk about anything political, but she was here. And what did her itinerary include? Her food included and prepared by the Singapore, I should say the Singapore team, included South Indian food, where one of her lineage comes from. And I thought that's quite interesting, you know, and they made it such a way, it's very homely. It wasn't in a 5-star hotel. She was given something very, very basic, the plates and all, from like a normal home. It's done by a 5-star hotel, Shangri-La hotel, by the 5-star hotel chef, but it's presented in such a way, it's a very homely way. So she was here, and the Singapore government actually prepared her itinerary and gave her South Indian food. So that's the final bonus news for the ladies and gentlemen and Miguel Flores. So that's a little bit of upbeat news for everyone about food, right?
We have everything. We have a bunch of everything.
F&B, shut down. Maybe I will talk about that next week, because it's already 1 hour, 16 minutes into the news. Miguel, would you like to wrap up in the next 2 minutes about, you know, our show and yourself? Is there anything you would like to add for the next 2 minutes?
Actually, the only thing that I want to add is that it's a pleasure to be here once again. I will never get tired of it saying it, and it's going to be a pleasure to be commenting things about that are happening to the world. Sometimes it's very difficult to get our perspective heard, and this is a good way to say, hey guys, there's something going on out there. We have to pay attention.
Thank you so much, Miguel. And you know, Miguel has been my co-host for the whole of 2020 for all of my shows.
For a while.
I go onto my radio, and I particularly have invited him for this important show, because Miguel Flores is one of the person with a lot of heart. You know, he talks from a place of passion. He talks from a place of authenticity. With him, it's always real. He doesn't try to mince his words, and it comes straight from his mouth, with it straight from his heart and straight from his soul. We know that he's always honest with his views. Miguel?
Oh my God. Maybe you praise a lot to me, you know.
If not, I wouldn't have always gotten you on all my shows, ladies and gentlemen. The shout out to Miguel Flores, Pam Dash podcast, and also talk about live international YouTube channel, and also talk about live by Vicky Astor in podcast, and also Love Radio on IOW network. Miguel, anything else for the next 10 seconds before we sign off?
Well, just be careful out there, and we'll see you next week.
Be careful out there. You're right, because the numbers in Singapore are rising. Even though we have got almost over 80% vaccination already. You know, ladies and gentlemen, I just want everyone to stay safe, and I want to wish Miguel and your family and your friends and your colleagues and your students, right? And your co-workers and your partners, all the love, the blessings and protection from me and from Singapore, Miguel.
Same here. All good stuff, good vibes here in Mexico City, all right?
Yeah, and ladies and gentlemen, this is the first episode of World News. No news is good news. A lot of Armageddon coming to you, but you know what? A lot of good news is coming too. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again. And I'm going to play our next shows that comes out with at Dr. Moby at News and Views. You will see the other co-hosts for the other shows with the rest of the shows. And this is myself, Vicky Astor. So Miguel, that is the trailer of you, Professor Cole, and also retired Chief Master Sergeant from the United States of America Air Force, and more shows coming up. So I'd like to say thank you and signing off from myself, Vicky Esther from Singapore, and also
Say hello, goodbye here from Miguel Flores. I hope
thank you so much, and also thank you the audience, and thank you Dr. Moby for Lifestyle TV USA, the #1 professional TV awarded by the Telly Awards in America, the #1 professional television. And thank you, Dr. Moby. Bye. See you next week.
Bye-bye.